Welcome to Dr Joe Unplugged. This podcast contains general information and is not in any way medical advice. Deficiency states for common vitamins and minerals should not be an issue in developed countries. Article here highlighting dietary trends away from dairy products, plus the increasing popularity of plant-based alternative milks, have contributed to an increased risk of iodine deficiency across Europe, according to a report from, of all people, the World Health Organization, its regional office for Europe, and the Iodine Global Network. Didn't know there was such a thing as an Iodine Global Network, but there you go. The report notes that most salt consumption now comes from meals prepared out of the home and processed foods, which may use non-iodized salt, and urgently calls for iodine fortification of all salt and plant-based alternatives to dairy products. Interesting. Fake foods of any description come at a cost. And look, if people don't want to have dairy, that's fine. You don't have to have dairy if you don't want to. And some people are allergic to dairy and it's obviously not suitable for them. If people don't want to have dairy for other reasons, whether they're vegan or vegetarian, although again I get some people who are vegetarians may have milk, others won't. It depends where they draw the line. But these plant-based milks, first of all, they're not actually milk. It's not milk by definition. They call it that, but it isn't. If you want to call it a milk-like substance, for want of a better term. But, if it comes from rice or oats or soy, look, it's compressed or manufactured from those plants, but I'd be much keener to actually eat rolled oats. If you want to eat oats, they're a reasonable part of your diet. Have rolled oats, that's fine. You want to have soy sauce, that's fine. But, whether or not they should be made into something that they're not, well, look, people can form their own views on that. I'll quote, even mild iodine deficiency, which exists throughout Europe, has a major impact on population health. Report notes that historically much of the European population was affected by endemic iodine deficiency, and it contributes particularly to thyroid disease, but potential consequences can include, in addition to thyroid problems, cardiac arrhythmias, so disturbances of heart rhythm, heart failure, osteoporosis, because iodine is also needed for bones aside from calcium and vitamin D, adverse pregnancy outcomes, and I must say that was something I was not personally aware of, and cognitive impairment in older people. So essentially we need iodine, like we need iron and we need vitamin D and we need magnesium and we need all the other essential vitamins and minerals that the body cannot manufacture. The body can manufacture glucose, it can manufacture some fatty acids, it can manufacture some amino acids, but we have essential fatty acids and essential, which are proteins, and essential fatty acids and essential amino acids, which are the proteins, because the body can't make them. And it can't make any vitamin or any mineral. Vitamins, vital amines, body can't make them. And again, same with minerals. So we need them from our food. And if we're not getting them from our food, we're not getting them from anywhere else. Now, some countries do have iodized salt, and you can buy those at the supermarket. And it's a good idea to look for that. And it's useful because it is a way of getting iodine. Iodine is also in a number of vegetables, and it is clearly in dairy products, and you can also get it to some degree from red meat. In countries where, and again I'm quoting, in countries where the use of iodized food-grade salt in households and processed foods is mandatory, particularly in domestic products such as bread and others, iodine status is generally adequate. So the issue they're facing in Europe, and it's not maybe as much of a problem in Australia, and I'm not familiar exactly with the United States, is that the salts used in manufactured foods might not be iodized. Now, again, mandating fortification, for example, of salt with iodine is probably not a bad idea. I'm never a massive fan of mandatory anything because it's forcing something on people, some of whom may not want it. But, in a case like this, there's really never going to do anybody any harm. Nobody's going to get an overdose or excessive iodine, and the body can get rid of it what it doesn't need. And there is a case that says that it's relatively cheap and easy to add iodine to salt, and as I mentioned, it is done in a number of countries, but apparently not in Europe. The quote, the escalating consumption of processed foods has also been blamed for the obesity epidemic now affecting much of Europe, and we know that that's a problem affecting all of the Western world and increasingly, or the developed world, and increasingly in the developing world as well. They're sort of going down the same path, maybe just a few years or decades later. The coexistence of iodine deficiency and overweight/obesity is known as the, in inverted commas, double burden of malnutrition, says Sarah Barth, a lecturer in public health at UK's University of Surrey. This can apply with individuals and population levels. So comes back to the increased consumption of processed and packaged foods. It's funny how so many of the problems that we're seeing health-wise in society today have a common thread through them. Not everything, not absolutely everything, is related to the consumption of processed and packaged foods, but it is a contributing factor to weight gain, to type 2 diabetes, to heart disease, to stroke, to a number of cancers. And if we look at pictures of groups of people from the 1970s or further back than that, something that you will note is you don't see a lot of people who were overweight. That changed in the early 1980s. Again, what happened in the early 1980s? The introduction of low-fat dietary guidelines. And, rightly or wrongly, and I get why people did it, and I think it's important to remember, and you can, find this online, the study's been done. The introduction of those guidelines was never based on any data or science or research. This seemed like a good idea at the time, but there was never any basis for doing it. And the public dutifully did what they were told by big public health, and we can really see 40 years on that it hasn't turned out very well. And we're still waiting for any sort of mea culpa or any sort of apology or, oh, look, we sort of thought we were doing the right thing, but it turns out we were wrong. They're still clinging to their low-fat dietary guidelines and still clinging to their stars or elephant stamps that a lot of these people get quite handsomely paid to put on certain foods. And it's a whole other scandal. We could have a whole separate podcast about that. All right, what do we need to do? Number one, eat real food, and that includes dairy. Now, for those who don't want to eat dairy, don't. If you don't like milk, if you don't like cheese, if you don't like yogurt, you don't have to eat it. You really don't. Some people might need to take a multivitamin that does have iodine in it. And there are other sources of dietary iodine. And again, that includes some vegetables. I'm not going to list out a whole lot. You can, Google this type of information. And, red meats have iodine. Again, appreciate that's not much help for vegans or vegetarians. But, fish may have an iodine content as well. But you can find a list if you go on and put into the search foods with high iodine concentration. It'll throw up a list, and you can pick out what suits you. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's what suits you. And supplements, do have a role. Although, interestingly, and I'll finish on this, is, fascinating. I don't know who does this work. A multivitamin a day won't keep death away. Of course not. Who's going to do a study that says if you take a multivitamin every day, you're not going to die? When I last checked, anybody who's ever died on this planet has consumed water and has breathed in air. So breathing in air won't stop you dying. Of course it won't. That's not what it's about. But for some reason, somebody's done a study on this, and of course, as tends to happen, big public health doesn't like the idea of multivitamins because that's people actually taking responsibility for their health, and they don't get any government grants for this. So a multivitamin can be helpful, although, again, more if your diet is insufficient, so it's good to get it from your diet, but not everybody's going to. And the other point with any supplements that you might want to consider taking is being targeted. So rather than taking an A to Z, and there's a role for that, again, Not going to stop you dying one day, but it may make you feel better along the way or help contribute towards you not being deficient or perhaps getting to an optimal level, but it also can be more useful to be targeted, so taking what you need. So if you need some vitamin D, take that rather than a bit of everything. If you need iron, take that rather than a bit of everything. And again, so it goes according to your individual circumstances. But it really is a problem when the dietary advice that has been pushed on people by big public health is resulting in twin issues, which now those same people are identifying but refusing to accept responsibility for. Don't wait for them to fess up. Take matters into your own hands and look after your own health. Thanks for listening to Dr. Joe Unplugged. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like and share. You can also follow it on all the socials. There'll be new content uploaded each week.